Welcome to Prototype Thinking in Action, where we talk to founders, dive into one big challenge that they are facing, and help them solve it by using the prototype thinking method. Let's get started.
So let me ask you about business and pilot and everything.
Business, pilot, all of that stuff is going really well. Shockingly, surprisingly well.
Good job.
I found a co-founder, made a little bit of money, built prototype. The prototypes started to transition from like individual burnout to organizational psychology and organizational structure. So around operational excellence and maintaining systems and structures that don't burn out people and resources across the board. And long story short, I got into the Microsoft for Startups program. They gave us, instead of the standard 5,000, once I gave them the outline for the product, they gave me $250,000 in credits.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And just tons of resources. I blew through that program in about 3 months and transitioned into the full partnership program, which is where I'm at now. They gave me access to even more credits and then waived a bunch of requirements for go-to-market co-sell.
Great.
Yeah, so they shaved about 18 months of work off, and we just got accepted as a co-sell partner.
Congratulations.
So, well, thank you. The PR campaign around that is supposed to launch here in a week or so, but their back end is struggling. So right now, when they transitioned us from a startup partner to a full co-sell partner, we had to start the validation process over to publish. And so they still haven't revalidated our business stuff, like the articles of incorporation. So I can't publish yet, but they keep pushing us through to more resources and more benefits and deeper into the organization. So that's been validating. It looks like our first customer, definitely the first pilot, is Autodesk, right? And you know that MC was working very closely with the journey, the discovery journey of like what's actually useful, from the wow, burnout actually is a real problem and it's about number 10 on the list, to now what we do is monitor decisions in the life cycle of a decision and catch roadmap drift early. Because if you can catch roadmap drift, then the conditions that cause burnout and time waste and money waste and all of that waste just doesn't happen.
Well, that's interesting because you originally were talking about roadmaps as your initial value proposition, but now you're not talking about roadmaps as the outcome. You're talking about roadmap drift as the prior moment that causes burnout. Like burnout is still your metric. So you've essentially flipped your metrics. Like instead of managing burnout to keep people on the roadmap, you're managing the roadmap to reduce burnout.
Right. Metrics of unsustainability that we were using to predict burnout.
Yeah.
Those are now leading metrics for roadmap drift.
Yeah.
So if we see that people are doing unsustainable things or if they're on the road to burnout, we're actually tying that back to the roadmap drift that's causing it. So now when you interact with Rhenari, you never actually interact with burnout or with individual level metrics at all. Even though we're still charting that, we're not surfacing that because it's difficult to maintain privacy. People feel like they're being surveilled, which is absolutely not what we ever wanted. And it's not the kind of value that companies were really, it was a nice to have. Like preventing burnout was a nice to have. And it turned out that when I was talking to the people who were burning out, their sense of burnout didn't matter to them. What mattered to them were the circumstances that were driving it. Pushing boulders up the hill every day and things like that with no progress, no value, no end, no achievement. And that's what people were surfacing as their major concern, not feeling tired.
Which is like meaningful work. Fascinating. Okay.
So that was what drove the major shift. Then talking to these managers and product owners, they're in an interesting position because they're stretched between having to produce metrics for their higher ups and wanting to maintain a healthy environment for their employees. But simply surfacing burnout wasn't a motivator for them.
Okay. So it was a motivator for a couple people at the beginning that we talked to, but not everybody else after that.
And it wasn't a motivator for deeper conversation. Even with the people for whom it was a motivator, it was something that was important to them, but it wasn't something that they could figure out how to translate into business gains to people that they had to qualify their purchases to. Not easily. So then the work in burnout transitioned from worrying about individual burnout and treating it like a thing that individuals need surfaced and managed, to the organizational angle of what systems can we change, what's driving the conditions that both sides are talking about, and how do we prevent that to begin with. And once I nailed that, it's been easy getting phone calls.
Cool.
Creating it, like actually building it, was obviously more difficult. We've been building and testing for a solid 6 months before we were finally ready to present to Microsoft. But we've been through their architecture reviews now, and they're security reviews and are fully established as a partner with them.
So how does it work now? Is it still pure Slack?
We started out fully integrated with the Microsoft environment, so Teams, and now we're actually building into Slack. And we just finished GitHub. Airtable was our first integration outside of Microsoft.
So what's the most helpful thing that I can do for you?
Structuring pilots.
Yeah.
Like, I know my companies and I know my customers very, 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 very well. I built ecosystem models. I know essentially who's answering to who and how. What I'm trying to figure out now is how to translate that into an easy system for setting hypotheses, testing environments, and not necessarily proving value. That's the other thing. The backend is extremely complex, but what we do for customers now, instead of surfacing burnout, we surface two scores. We surface momentum, which is just acceleration factors minus friction factors that are determined by our backend, and confidence. How confident can you be that this is your actual momentum score right now? And then specific insights and alerts about why those are the scores. And that's how we tell people about their roadmap health.
Can you tell me more about confidence?
Sure. So there are multiple factors that lend into the confidence, but essentially a product owner will spend about 40% of their time trying to make sure that people are following through with the decisions that they made, gathering a bunch of information that they trust. And then at the end of it, they're still finding that there was drift. The next team got a product that they weren't expecting or whatever else. So what confidence does is, instead of just telling you, your momentum is 6, the confidence tells you you can trust that with a variance of about 15%. So we're 80% confident that your momentum is 6, and here's why it's only 80%, or here's why it went up to 80%.
And you're like, oh, my momentum is really bad. And then you can ask it what's causing it or whatever.
Exactly. And if the momentum drifts significantly over a short period of time, you get an instant alert. Okay, your momentum has dropped 0.5% in the last 2 weeks. We're 80% confident or 90% confident that that's true. And here are the circumstances that are behind that drop.
Well, can you give me an example of some circumstances?
Sure. For example, you might have a key person leave your organization and communication between teams drops. Rhenari would be able to surface, like, we may not know that you lost a key person, but we would be able to show that an information silo has pulled up in this department, or communication has dropped by 30% between these teams.
Cool.
Which is bad because they're working on a project together. Those are the kinds of things that we surface.
So it's sort of like you see this abstract shape of how work and collaboration is happening, and then you can sample, measure, and show it to people. That's really cool. Awesome.
Yep. What's happening and directions on how to start figuring out how to intervene. And those were the things that people said they wanted more than anything. And it feels like magic at this point.
I wish I was in an organization large enough to see this operate, because it does sound like magic. Okay, so let's see, pilots and how to run pilots. Well, tell me what your goals are for the pilot.
My goal should be to turn a pilot into a customer, but really my goal is to see, number one, do those metrics, momentum and confidence, actually make managers feel, so this is not very qualifiable, but do they make managers feel confident that they know what's happening in their organization? And then secondarily, are they actually aligned with what's really happening? So that's 1 and 2. And then number 3 is, are the alert catching drift and delivering those insights in a meaningful way, in an actionable way?
So it's like, is it actually adding value, and is it actually successfully reflecting the organization, and also is the output that is providing useful to people? So it's one pilot right now in Autodesk across MC's organization, which is like 60 people-ish, something like that. How big is our org?
Something like that. We're going to start with a small cross section of teams, because this actually works better if it crosses boundaries. And as it stands now, about 30 people, between 30 and 50.
Okay, 30 and 50.
We're having another kickoff meeting here in about 2 weeks to nail those numbers down precisely.
How many managers?
6.
Walk me through your timeline of what needs to happen. You said you have your kickoff in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to be able to integrate at that point, but what we're definitely doing is meeting all the managers and getting them used to the idea. We still have to go through legal and IT, which we're all hoping happens in 2 weeks, but whether or not it does, talking to these managers about what this could or could not do, whether or not we need to add a goal or decision tracking interface directly to Rhenari. So we're trying to figure out a couple more features that need to happen. So I guess I don't know when the actual pilot is slated to start, because we have so many things we need to do before that.
Okay, cool. So you have room to ask them for stuff. Right. I mean, offhand, my favorite thing for pilots is early hands-on and early visibility, unsurprisingly. So if you can get half an hour with each of the managers a week after kickoff. And let's say the first week and the second week, or the first week and the third week, or something like that. And it's really all about what you put in to get the visibility. So they're going to be chatting with the chatbot, and you'll have access to all of that.
Which should be all in the same Teams chat. Yep.
What do you mean all in the same Teams chat?
So the other thing that I found during customer discovery was that the last thing anybody wants is like a separate tool or a different dashboard. That's why we went with Microsoft. So this
Yeah.
entire thing is run like an extra employee directly in Teams. There's no
Oh, yeah,
separate
for sure.
tool.
Yeah. Okay. But they have private lines.
I don't think so. Nope, it's a team thing.
So, like, do all 6 managers see the same report?
They should all see the same report.
Oh,
Later
interesting.
on, we'll be able to break it up into departments. But
Oh.
right now, since it's organizational and we're tracking specifically decisions and project between these teams, they should all see the same thing. And that helps with 2 problems. That helps with the visibility and information silos between teams that are interdependent. And it means that we can work with smaller groups because we have more people. We actually, because of privacy, can't work with teams with fewer than 10 people. We can't take
Okay.
because it just is too revealing.
I have this thought that if it's all the same, there's a political issue about what managers are willing to communicate with the bot about. Because, like, what if it's someone's fault and you need to know whether it's this person's fault, but you can't ask in front of this person? Or, like, what if one team consistently is dropping the ball? And so, as a manager, I would feel more comfortable being able to have my queries not be scrutinized.
Okay, so admins can do that, but not the other managers. So there are seats and admins, and an admin can do that. And now that I'm hearing it like this, I wonder though, I worry that if other managers could pull up that information, they would essentially be able to build a case against someone else secretly.
Oh, I see. Okay, so they wouldn't get that access to that information anyway.
Right. And with it being AI that will
Yeah.
potentially answer anything however you want, if you prompt it or prod it, we can't control that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, for the purposes of the pilot, I think it would still at least be helpful to allow people to have individual access to you, even if it's not the chatbot, even if there's a private line that they can chat with their questions on and like ask you to look up for them or something like that.
Got
right?
it.
And sometimes you can answer and sometimes you don't, but at least you know what they're thinking. I mean, how do you handle political tension to begin with?
Yeah, you're surfacing something that I hadn't thought about.
Well, I guess we'll find out.
I don't know about political tension per se, but we do a temperature check on communication as a friction factor component. So if tensions are rising, if it's personalities clashing and these guys shouldn't be communicating directly, that'll show up in friction, but it won't make the individuals.
I think that will happen in many companies, including many I've worked in. I don't want your impact to get lost in everybody being too diplomatic.
That is a blind spot. I didn't think about political friction. Like we're set up to judge the trajectory of a decision, work that's actually completed, communication and information silos, key person issues.
Yeah, but an information silo is intrinsically political. Like many times it's someone's fault.
Yeah, almost always. And I guess how you manage that is not necessarily something on my side. And like misaligned priorities, we do that, which could be along the lines of political.
A successful pilot happens when the team takes the output of the information that they get and they change their behavior in a way that positively affects the organization. So the output that you want, and the thing you want to be very visible on, is behavior change on the people who get that information. What are the paths to behavior change? And how do you minimize friction for that behavior change to happen, even slightly artificially, for example, with lots of extra support, because later you will solve it with better UI and higher, more advanced chatbots or whatever. How do you see it happen? And most of all, you want to see where it could almost happen, but may or may not, because that space of almost happened but didn't is where your design changes are. So you want to lower the friction of having visibility into almost happen, which means that they have to be able to perceive whether it almost happens in order to be able to report it to you, or you have to see their train of thought as they're interacting with it, or something vaguely that structured. And what I don't know is I don't know what the menu of possible change to behaviors are. Do you know that, or is that one of the things we're discovering?
I have a framework where I've started organizing that, but I haven't really gone through and identified what they all are. It sounds like I need to spend some quality time with that.
I would just go through a list of your top 30 or so scenarios of things that might surface and just be like, okay, it surfaces a communication silo because an employee left. What's the obvious behavior change that happens? If it surfaces that in a public chat, should these two managers talk to each other and and find a new solution. Misaligned priorities. Quite often, if you have misaligned priorities, you kind of know deep down inside you have misaligned priorities. Because how much of this is an external source of validation of what you already know and are frustrated by in a way that creates an alibi for you to be able to talk about it? That's a very different type of behavior change versus I genuinely did not know we had misaligned priorities and let's go align them. And we have a priority meeting and now we're good. Both are very, very possible, but they're very different types of behavioral outcomes. What do you picture happening in that range of situations?
Yes, you're absolutely right. In most cases that I found during interviews, people actually know that their priorities are misaligned. They tell
Yeah.
themselves things like, this is just something that we have to get done. And as soon as it's done, I'm going to go back to this other thing that I had to
Yeah.
deliver for this other department. But because there's no overarching standard of prioritization, they can do that. The problem is because there's no comparison and there's no external support for actually making the decision to let something go to manage a priority that's actually shared, it doesn't get confronted. Just like you said, it's not necessarily always that they don't know, it's that
Yeah.
there's no mechanism for eliciting confrontation.
So if we divide what Rhenari provides in 3 categories, one is genuinely new, useful information. One is a way to articulate a feeling you've had. And the last one is something like a frustrating statement of something you already know and have already tried to solve and haven't been able to. And the leverage is so different in all of these 3, and especially in organizations that are dysfunctional in some way, there's more politically complicated relationship between information and solution. And some of these misaligned priorities happen for a reason, like the side effect symptoms of 2 VPs butting heads and all the way down, there's this thing, and we just all kind of cope with it. So then if that just sits there at the manager level being a downgrade on my score, that's going to bum me out. And it's not like I can escalate it up the chain. It's a problem I've already failed to solve.
All of these scenarios have come up organically in interviews and in conversations. I'm like, hey, what if you had a tool that does this? And they start imagining, man, here's a situation or a scenario that this would address.
And what do they want the tool to be doing for them in this sense? Do they want a report they can take to their boss and say, look, this is the measurable cost of your not getting these people to agree with each other? Or do they want to just click okay and understand that and black box that or whatever? But the point is, I think that MC's team, they are as safe an environment as you can get on feeling out what you want to do with the politics of the trickier ones. So I think you don't need to feel super confident about your answers as long as you're operating your test in a way that you can have conversations and visibility into the trickier cases. Another thing you can do is just journey map the pilot from the manager's point of view and make sure that you are controlling and designing that experience and that your touch points are where you want them to be.
I'm so glad we had this conversation because it has definitely impacted the way that I'm structuring the pilot.
And then this is more broad, but the single biggest reason pilots die is people don't have the emotional energy to go think about them. And then they just kind of ignore them, not because they're not good, but because they don't have the org change capacity. So you want to put in about 3 times more effort than you think you do to do the org change and get attention from people on people's calendars in advance.
I wonder if I can even do this with Teams. It's not a limitation with Slack, being able to just deliver these individually in separate chats where people can actually interact with the alerts and ask the chatbot. I think we have enough security in place that you couldn't ask about an individual's actions directly.
If we can't change it, we can't change it. If I get a notification about a project in a public channel, my first reaction is, how do I manage the narrative of this to other teams? Whereas if I get it in private, my first reaction is, what do I do with this information?
I wonder which of those is best for a situation where you have people politically trying to avoid having these conversations.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we just run it with whatever you got and let me see what happens.
That's a whole new set of problems.
Sorry, bro.
No, that's exciting. Most of the work that I've done so far has been pretty sterilized of what do organizations do and how do I turn this into an algorithm and how do I put out outputs that are secure and not individually revealing. But this nuance is invigorating.
I also really want to get you a second pilot soon so that you don't over-index on one pilot.
Love that. But building out this partnership with Microsoft has taken up entirely too much of my life. But with Autodesk's internal tooling, we're having to expand integrations earlier than we thought. And so we're available for a broader category of
what
companies.
type of tech stack do you need them to have?
We needed Microsoft, but now because they have other stuff outside of the Microsoft tooling, now we're set for Google and fully integrating with Slack.
You're set for Google?
We're building into Google right now. Yep.
Okay. That's really doable. Everybody uses Microsoft or Google. My dream pilot for you would be an entire company that's a much faster paced team than Autodesk. So a 30 to 60 person startup type of company. Doesn't necessarily have to be tech.
A larger sample and a comparative sample. If we can compare these legacy software companies to a more high growth modern software company and get a good cross section of what's working and what's not between the two of them, then the next rollout of Rhenari is more prescriptive. Right now, it's kind of passive.
Do you actually need to run it on a live company, or can you take a company that is gone and crawl over their previous data?
We'd love that.
Well, let me think for a bit.
That'll help us refine our models too. I wonder how we would get insight into the people dynamics with that. Maybe we don't need to. We just need to see if our stuff is predicting the outcomes that happen.
Yeah, that's a way lower friction way to test some of the core functionality level stuff.
Exactly.
Everyone wants a report analyzing what their workflow's like. It's like free consulting.
That's kind of our proposition. To do what Rhenari does, most companies go and hire a major consulting organization that goes in and disrupts the company for 6 months and then sends them a PDF that nobody ever views. And we're just doing exactly what those companies do, but omnipotently, in real time, continuously.
That's very juicy. That is super sexy. Okay, awesome. Yeah, let me know what you get. I would love to check in with you when you start getting data back.
Will do. Thank you for this. This is clarifying.
Thank you for listening to Prototype Thinking in Action. Don't forget to like and subscribe, join our email list, and follow us for exclusive access to tools, case studies, and live workshops. All links can be found in the description below. See you next time.